Imagine waking up 30,000 years ago with no phone beside you, no alarm clock ringing, and no glowing screen waiting to fill your attention. There is no electricity, no internet, no television, no computer, and no machine doing the hard work for you. At first, most modern people imagine this life as endless struggle from sunrise until sleep. Every hour seems like it must have been spent hunting, gathering, escaping predators, and fighting to stay alive. But the daily life of ancient humans may have been far more complex than that simple picture suggests. Their days were certainly demanding, and survival was never guaranteed. Yet they were not necessarily working every minute in the way modern people often imagine work. There were times for finding food, but there were also times for resting, repairing tools, talking, learning, playing, and caring for others. A prehistoric day did not follow a clock. It followed sunlight, weather, hunger, seasons, animal movement, and the needs of the group. Some days may have been intense and dangerous. Other days may have been slower, quieter, and surprisingly social. This is what makes the question so interesting. What did ancient humans actually do all day without technology? Did they spend every waking moment searching for food? Or did they have more free time, flexibility, and social life than we usually imagine? To answer that, we first need to forget the modern idea of a workday. There was no 9-to-5 schedule. There was no boss measuring hours. There was no weekend waiting at the end of the week. Instead, ancient humans organized life around immediate needs and natural rhythms. If food was available, the day might include gathering, sharing, and resting. If danger appeared, the entire group might shift focus instantly. If tools broke, someone had to repair them before they were needed again. If children needed teaching, adults and older siblings became their school. Their day was not empty just because they lacked technology. It was filled with tasks that kept the group alive and connected. And the first task most people think about was finding food. But surprisingly, finding food may not have taken as much of the day as many modern people assume. When people imagine prehistoric life, they often picture hunters chasing animals from sunrise until sunset without a single moment of rest. The reality was probably far more flexible. Hunter-gatherers did not hunt every single day because large animals were not always available and successful hunts were never guaranteed. Many groups actually obtained a significant portion of their daily calories from gathering plants, fruits, nuts, roots, seeds, and other easily collected foods. Gathering was often more predictable than hunting and could provide reliable nutrition throughout much of the year. Hunting became especially important when opportunities appeared or when larger amounts of food were needed. A successful hunt could feed many people for several days. That meant there was not always a reason to hunt again immediately the following morning. Instead of working continuously, ancient humans adjusted their activities according to what the environment offered. Some days required long journeys to find food. Other days provided enough resources within a short distance of camp. Nature determined the schedule. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have made an interesting observation. Many spend fewer hours directly obtaining food than the average modern office worker spends at work. This does not mean their lives were easy. Their survival still depended on weather, seasons, and uncertainty. But it does challenge the popular image of constant nonstop labor. Ancient humans understood something modern societies often forget. Spending more energy than necessary could be dangerous. Every unnecessary step burned calories that might be difficult to replace later. Efficiency mattered far more than appearing busy. If enough food had already been collected, there was little reason to waste energy searching for more. Instead, people could invest time in other activities that also improved survival. Food had to be cleaned, divided, prepared, and shared among the community. Children needed to eat. Older members of the group needed support. Resources had to be managed carefully so they lasted as long as possible. Even after the search for food ended, the work of maintaining life continued. Finding food was only one piece of a much larger system. The rest of the day was filled with dozens of smaller tasks that were just as important for survival. Because bringing home today's meal meant very little if tomorrow's tools were broken or tomorrow's shelter was falling apart. Finding food may have been the most visible part of ancient life, but it was far from the only work that filled each day. Survival depended just as much on preparation as it did on hunting. Stone tools became dull after repeated use and had to be sharpened before they could cut effectively again. Wooden spear shafts cracked, bindings loosened, and hunting equipment constantly required repair. Someone had to collect suitable stones, shape new blades, and replace broken tools before the next hunt began. Animal hides needed to be cleaned, scraped, stretched, and dried if they were going to remain useful. Plant fibers had to be gathered and twisted into cordage for tying tools, building shelters, and carrying supplies. Firewood needed constant replenishment because a dying fire could leave the entire group without warmth, light, or protection during the night. Water also demanded daily attention. In many environments, people had to walk considerable distances to collect enough water for drinking, cooking, and other essential needs. Shelters required regular maintenance because wind, rain, and daily use slowly weakened even the best natural structures. Branches had to be replaced. Roofs needed patching. Sleeping areas had to be kept as dry and comfortable as possible. Children also occupied a large portion of every day. Unlike many animals, human children remained dependent for many years, requiring constant care, supervision, and teaching. Adults did not simply feed them. They demonstrated how to recognize edible plants, shape stone tools, read animal tracks, and behave safely within the group. Learning happened continuously, through observation and participation, rather than formal lessons. Even ordinary conversations became opportunities to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. Older children often helped care for younger ones, allowing the entire community to share the responsibility of raising the next generation. None of these activities looked as dramatic as hunting a large animal, yet they were every bit as essential for survival. A broken spear could mean a failed hunt. A neglected shelter could become dangerous during a storm. A child who failed to learn basic survival skills might struggle later in life. The success of a hunter-gatherer group depended on hundreds of small tasks being completed day after day. Ancient humans were not simply searching for food. They were constantly maintaining the tools, knowledge, shelters, and relationships that made survival possible. And among all those daily activities, one occupied far more time than most people would ever expect: simply spending time with one another. To modern eyes, sitting around and talking may not look like work at all. For ancient humans, however, social life was one of the most productive parts of the day. Strong relationships often meant the difference between surviving a difficult season and facing it alone. People spent time sharing stories about recent hunts, unusual animal behavior, changing weather, and places where food had been found. These conversations allowed valuable information to spread throughout the entire group instead of remaining with a single individual. Children learned simply by staying close to adults and listening. There were no classrooms, no textbooks, and no written instructions. Daily life itself became the classroom. A child watching someone shape a stone blade or prepare edible plants was already receiving an education. Stories also carried lessons that were difficult to teach through direct experience alone. An elder could describe a dangerous mistake made many years earlier, allowing younger generations to avoid repeating it. Laughter played an important role as well. Sharing jokes, telling amusing stories, and celebrating successful hunts strengthened the bonds that held the community together. Anthropologists have suggested that conversation may have served a similar purpose to grooming in other primates. Chimpanzees strengthen relationships by grooming each other's fur. Humans strengthen relationships by talking. This simple difference allowed much larger groups to remain connected and cooperative. Conflicts also required attention. Disagreements over food, responsibilities, or personal behavior could threaten the stability of the group if left unresolved. Talking through problems was often safer than allowing resentment to grow. People also planned together. They discussed tomorrow's hunting routes. They decided when to move camp. They shared observations about changing seasons and animal migrations. Every conversation helped coordinate future actions before they happened. Even quiet moments spent watching children play or observing experienced hunters could become valuable learning opportunities. In many ways, there was no clear boundary between work and social life. Teaching, learning, planning, storytelling, and building trust often happened simultaneously. Time spent together was an investment in the group's future. A community that communicated well usually cooperated well, and a cooperative group stood a far better chance of surviving than a collection of isolated individuals. But despite all these responsibilities, ancient humans understood something that many modern societies often overlook. Sometimes the smartest thing you could do was nothing at all, because rest was not a sign of laziness. It was an essential part of survival. Modern life often teaches us that productivity means staying busy from morning until night. For ancient humans, wasting energy could be just as dangerous as running out of food. Every movement required calories, and every calorie had to be replaced through hunting or gathering. If unnecessary effort produced no benefit, it simply reduced the body's chances of surviving future challenges. Rest, therefore, became part of a successful survival strategy. After a demanding hunt or a long journey, people often took time to recover instead of immediately searching for another task. Muscles repaired themselves. Energy reserves were restored. Small injuries had a chance to heal before becoming more serious. This was especially important because even minor injuries could become life-threatening without modern medicine. The environment also influenced daily rhythms. In hot climates, the middle of the day could become too warm for strenuous activity. Many groups likely slowed down during the hottest hours and became more active again when temperatures cooled. Nature, rather than a clock, determined the pace of life. Children spent much of this quieter time playing. But play was far more than entertainment. Young children practiced throwing, climbing, running, balancing, and observing the world around them. Older children copied adults by making miniature tools, pretending to hunt, and learning social rules through games. Without realizing it, they were preparing for adult responsibilities. Observation itself became a valuable activity. People watched the weather. They watched animal behavior. They watched plants changing with the seasons. These quiet moments often produced knowledge that later proved essential for survival. Ancient humans understood that patience could be more valuable than constant action. A hunter who waited quietly beside a game trail often had greater success than one who wandered endlessly through the landscape. The same principle applied to many parts of life. Knowing when not to act could be just as important as knowing when to move. This way of living may seem unfamiliar to modern societies, where idleness is often viewed negatively. Yet for our ancestors, conserving strength was a practical decision based on experience. Rest was never the opposite of survival. It was one of the tools that made survival possible. By balancing effort with recovery, ancient humans remained prepared for the next unexpected challenge, whether it arrived the following morning or weeks later. And perhaps the most remarkable part of their daily routine was that no 2 days were ever exactly the same. Because unlike our lives today, their schedule was never controlled by technology. It was controlled entirely by nature. When we imagine life without technology, it is easy to assume that ancient humans lived simpler lives than we do today. In reality, their days were shaped by something just as powerful as technology: nature. There were no clocks telling people when to wake up, no calendars reminding them of appointments, no work schedules dividing the day into fixed hours. Instead, the rising sun signaled the beginning of activity, and darkness gradually brought the day to an end. The changing seasons constantly transformed daily routines. Spring offered different opportunities than winter. Summer required different strategies than autumn. A group might remain in one area while food was abundant, then travel great distances once resources became scarce. Weather could change every plan within a single day. A sudden storm might delay a hunt. Heavy rain could force people to repair shelters instead of gathering food. The appearance of migrating animals might encourage the entire group to move earlier than expected. Nothing followed a rigid timetable. Flexibility was one of humanity's greatest strengths. Ancient humans constantly adjusted their behavior according to changing conditions, rather than forcing nature to adapt to them. In many ways, they lived according to rhythms that had existed for millions of years. Their lives were synchronized with sunrise and sunset, with rainfall and drought, with migration and harvest, with warmth and cold. Modern technology has allowed us to separate ourselves from many of these natural cycles. Electric lights extend our days. Refrigerators store food for weeks. Vehicles eliminate long walks. Climate-controlled buildings protect us from changing weather. Ancient humans had none of these advantages. Instead, they became remarkably skilled at reading the world around them. The sky became their calendar. Animal behavior became their forecast. The landscape became their map. Their own bodies became their clock. Perhaps this is the greatest misunderstanding about prehistoric life. Ancient humans did not spend every waking moment struggling against nature. They spent their lives learning how to live with it. Work, rest, learning, play, conversation, and cooperation all blended together into a way of life shaped by the environment rather than by machines. Ironically, although they possessed far fewer tools than we do today, they often had far greater freedom over how each day unfolded. Their schedule changed whenever nature changed. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson their daily lives still offer us. Technology has transformed the way humans spend their time. But long before machines organized our days, our ancestors had already discovered something equally valuable. The key to survival was not filling every hour with work. It was knowing exactly what needed to be done, when it needed to be done, and when it was finally time to simply rest and wait for tomorrow.